Let's talk about the next thing that we're seeing. This is. I gotta admit, I saw this story and I'm laughing. Quote: "We all quit." Restaurant signs claiming staff walking out are popping up across the U.S. These tweets are something else. There's on Chipotle, on Burger King, on Wendy's, McDonald's, signs being like, "We're closed because no one shut up today." There's signs people putting up saying, "We refuse to work for such little wages."
Right.
And there's a couple things. For one, we know Biden is basically paying people more money to not work than they could get from working.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
But also inflation. So if people, you mentioned earlier that people, 40% of their weekly budget is going to food. So if you're working at a fast food restaurant, it doesn't matter if you're getting $15 an hour or $20 an hour. What matters is how much food can you afford to buy at the end of the week. At the end of the week, they could pay you $1,000 or $10,000. But if your food costs $4,000, $10,000 doesn't mean anything.
That's exactly right. I mean, if you can keep getting your wages raised, but the price of food goes higher than they're raising the wages, you're getting a cut in pay. And that's what happens in Argentina, Venezuela. That's what's happening right now. They keep printing like mad, but they can't control inflation. And the policymakers will say there's no inflation because their banking constituents want that 0% money to keep consolidating in mergers and acquisitions and leveraged buyouts. So they say it's at 1.6%, even though it has a patent falsehood.
But the supply situation is going to be something we can't hide. So you have the shortages of all these microchips that's affecting all sorts of the economy. The problem with labor is a real genuine problem. And just on the drive up here, we saw hundreds and hundreds of signs all over the place begging people to come apply for jobs. Even in the middle of a field, like there was a sign, Domino's is looking for drivers.
Yeah, a bunch of cows and a sign advertising for Domino's jobs.
Yeah.
How did that? They're going to hire cows? What's going on?
All right, wait. Ian, order more vinegar.
I'm into it.
We got to just start buying whatever we can.
Into it.
Yeah,
Well, if people start hoarding, which then feeds an inflationary cycle, then prices go up because now
But I'll get the vinegar first.
I just bought 150 pounds of flour.
No, I already bought you 100 pounds of flour.
Hey, I got 150 more.
But it's that sort of mindset. The psychology is what is really important to hyperinflation or whatever. I mean, but the other point I want to make is like I was just retweeted a story a day or two ago about in Durham, North Carolina, which is a pretty big city outside of Raleigh, and they can't find 911 operators. Whoa. So they're having to divert. They had to admit that they've been diverting calls to Raleigh overnight because there's, the
economy's been hollowed out, right, through private equity deals, cheap money, borrowing, and debt. So it's been hollowed out. It's just a shell that's cracking in real time. All that money was stolen, trillions stolen from the economy, Tim. It's fragile, like an egg shell, and it's cracking. The people are now on the streets, and the revolution is in the air.
So you guys have seen The Wolf of Wall Street.
No,
I never saw it.
You never saw it?
But Max worked on Wall Street during those times.
So this was like, in the film, you basically have a bunch of coked out, drugged out Wall Street guys being like, yeah!
Stop talking about Max like that.
And they're just like,
I'm not selling.
They know that I'm not selling. I'm staying. Yeah. But it's like these people know that they're ripping people off, basically. Like they're just extracting access to resources and value from a system without providing anything to it.
That's right. Wall Street, my job on Wall Street, it was a microcosm of the economy as a whole. So the byword as a stockbroker is do whatever you can to get commissions, and we've got lawyers. There's no such thing as the rule of law on Wall Street. You get the commission first, and if the feds come after you, you deal with it later. You pay
the fine.
You pay fines. Wall Street keeps 90 cents of every dollar they steal. Right, 10 cents goes to the fines. Or the great thing about Wall Street is that they just changed the law. For example, when Citigroup bought Travelers, it's a big multi-billion-dollar deal. They broke the Glass-Steagall law that had been in place since the 30s. They simply retroactively changed the law and said, we're going to change the law, and it retroactively applies to that deal. There is no rule of law on Wall Street, stop.
I think it's just the rot goes deeper than this. Have you guys ever seen these things? They're called like power bracelets or balance bracelets. They're rubber bands that they sell for like $30. And they say when you wear it, it improves your balance. And they use a trick called the center of gravity illusion. It's really simple. You ask someone to stand with their feet together and their arms straight at their sides. You then put your hand on their arm and pull downward slightly away from their body. They'll fall over. Then you put the wristband on their hand, and then you push slightly into their body, and they won't fall over, but you can actually like hang because you're pushing towards their center of gravity. Salespeople, I would see them in these malls. They'd be doing this trick. And I'm thinking to myself, I know how the trick works. You could do it with a rock. You could do it with anything. How are they getting away with selling rubber bands for $30 and lying to people? So I looked it up. It's very simple. Someone will start a company. They'll knowingly defraud people. The FTC would come in and say, you gotta pay us $5 million. And they go, oh no, we only made 10. Here's your 5. Here's your cut. And then they take that money and they do the same thing with a new company, a new entity, and they sell trash products, pay their fine, start a new company, trash products, and they get, destroyed, shut down, but the government's getting a cut of it. So instead of actually policing these companies and saying, stop doing this, they're like, so long as we get money, I think,
it's called the captured regulator.
Yeah.
So the SEC and Elon Musk proved this brilliantly when recently he broke some laws and he openly mocked the SEC.
How about Austin, Texas, when they banned Uber because they were losing money on the drunk driving tickets? They're like,
wow.
we want people to drunk drive because the police made so much money from it in the city.
So revolution's in the air. The system has been hollowed out.
When you guys
extracted.
You guys mentioned derivatives earlier. What was the history of the creation of derivatives? Because that seemed like part of this hollowing.
Right. So derivatives go back to the option pricing formula for volatility that came around during the early 80s. And under the Reagan deregulatory environment, you had listed options. So listed options are essentially the first derivative and product. And so this is simply an option on the future price movement of a stock. And it's a big market, the options market. And then during the 80s, they introduced financial derivatives. Up until then, it was confined to stocks and commodities, where the futures contracts, as you could say, is a derivative. So futures contracts have been around for hundreds of years. It's a way for agricultural companies to hedge against the weather, right? So they can sell their product today to a speculator, and therefore they don't have the risk of their product arriving to market and losing everything because they need it to plant the next season. But with the financial derivative, you had the S&P futures and bond futures and money market futures and forex futures. So gave banks the way to speculate on money itself in a highly leveraged way. And that was the beginning of financial derivatives. And that's the beginning of when we have a global Ponzi scheme of banks essentially trading on inside information with each other on financial shenanigans in a way that was incredibly leveraged. But you're right in the sense that at some point, the derivatives market became bigger than the underlying market, right? So the derivatives market should only be a fraction of the underlying market. To give you an example of this, in the oil market, for every barrel of oil, there's something like 60,000 barrels in oil derivatives. Whoa. Right? That's how leveraged this whole thing is. For the global economy, which is, let's call it $100 trillion global economy, there's more than a quadrillion in derivatives, right? The derivatives market is a multi-quadrillion dollar market.
So an example of that would be like if a company loses $6 million in assets or something, but people bet on that, they can make $60 million on that $6 million loss in a derivative?
Well, one great milestone in the derivative business was the credit default swap invention by Blythe Masters. With Exxon, remember the Exxon Valdez oil spill?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of Exxon suffering financial calamity from that, Blythe Masters invented the credit default swap, where she was able to strip out bonds from bond interest and sell the interest separately, essentially, and insulated Exxon from that disaster. So they took the event, which would have been a liability, and they turned it into a non-event, effectively.
Wow.
So that's just what we call financial engineering, and so you could say that it's a way to slice and dice securities into all different things. If you go to the 2008, the subprime crisis was a derivatives crisis because they took subprime mortgages, which have a high probability of defaulting, and they mixed it with a AAA rated government bond, and then they sold that mixed package as a tranche to a pension fund with the idea that, well, the probability of this collapsing is so minute that we're going to give it the same rating as the bond, a AAA rating.
Wow. This is like the housing crisis?
Yeah.
They took
so what happened was, for the
mortgages.
first time in history, you had a housing crisis over the entire country. And so the subprime market collapsed spectacularly. And instead of fining or penalizing the banks that packaged this garbage, even in testimony, they told Congress that these were bags of expletive. that they were selling to Goldman Sachs. Not only did Goldman Sachs knowingly and openly sell bags of expletives to clients.
Excrement.
Yes. Excrement. They then made bets against their clients knowing that the clients would blow up. So they made money on the short side. They sold their own client short to make money on the collapse of the client that they knew was going to happen because they had sold them the bags of excrement. So that's how insidious and awful and corrupt this whole system is.
It's kind of like encouraging your wife to go skydiving and then taking out a massive life insurance policy on her.
And then
knowing that she has no idea what she's doing.
And then selling short the airline company or the skydiving company, knowing that they're going to be sued out of existence.
I have to also point out that, while we're talking about inflation, this is the thing that's so topsy-turvy about everything and why we have such a chaos in our economic system is those derivatives are collapsing, and that is a black hole, and that is a huge amount of deflation, right? So if that's worth nothing, but it's right now on paper worth a quadrillion, that's a lot of money. That's like many trillions that we'd have to print every month just to break even on that.
Right. So the central bank has bought now trillions of dollars worth of this paper from Wall Street. $8 trillion that to re-liquefy Wall Street.
But that's just a small fraction of it. So.
Right. But they buy it at 100 cents on the dollar. But when you say, okay, what's the resale value? It's zero. So the Federal Reserve Bank is leveraged more than 100 to 1. Which is they're leveraged more than Enron. I mean, Enron was leveraged 80, 70, or 80 to 1, and it collapsed in a day. The Federal Reserve Bank is leveraged much more than Enron was leveraged, and it could collapse overnight. Because
that's the problem with whether or not it's inflation or deflation. And this is a debate. This is a debate that we've been having on all of our content for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Like nobody, economists, bankers, nobody knows for sure which one we're actually having.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.